The white roses were dying. Isolde Ashford noticed this first. Not the whispers, not the pitying glances, not even the empty space where Adrian Blackwood should have been standing. Just the roses in her trembling hands, their petals curling inward like something trying to protect itself from inevitable harm. She understood exactly how they felt. The Church of St. Crispin stood cold despite the press of bodies. 300 guests filled the pews, their breath forming small clouds in air that should not have been this frigid in late September. 300 witnesses to what was meant to be the wedding of the season. 300 pairs of eyes watching Isolde stand alone at an altar, waiting for a groom who would not come. The light was wrong, too. Sunset bled through the stained glass windows in shades of crimson and amber that seemed almost violent. The candles along the aisle flickered without wind, their flames bending towards something Isolde could not see. She had been standing here for 45 minutes. Her wedding gown, ivory silk with Belgian lace that had cost her family more than they could afford, felt like a burial shroud. Perhaps the carriage overturned, her mother had whispered half an hour ago, voice tight with forced hope. The roads can be treacherous at dusk, her father had added. 15 minutes passed, though his face had gone the color of old parchment. Now no one said anything at all. Isolde kept her spine straight, her chin lifted, her gaze fixed on the stained glass above the altar where painted saints looked down with expressions that might have been pity or might have been warning. She would not turn around, would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her face crumble, but she could hear them. 45 minutes now. I heard Lord Adrian was seen leaving London yesterday evening. Traveling north, they said. North, but the wedding is... Precisely. The word landed like a blade between Isolde's shoulder blades. She had known Adrian Blackwood for 6 months, had endured his casual dismissiveness, his charming cruelty, his way of looking through her as though she were made of glass, had smiled through dinner parties where he forgot her name, had convinced herself that marriage would change him, that duty would soften him, that she could learn to be enough. She had been wrong about everything. Outside the sun was setting, Isolde could see it through the western windows, a blood-red sphere sinking toward the horizon with unnatural speed. The light in the church shifted, dimmed. The candles burned brighter in response, their flames now perfectly still. Something was coming. Isolde felt it before she heard it. A change in the air pressure, a collective intake of breath from 300 guests. The massive oak doors at the back of the church groaned open and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. She turned. A man stood in the doorway. Not Adrian. Lucian Blackwood, Duke of Ravenscar, filled the entrance like a figure carved from shadow and moonlight. He wore black from collar to boots, the fabric so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His hair black as ink swept back from a face that would have been handsome if it were not so utterly and humanly pale. But it was his eyes that stopped Isolde's breath. Gray as winter storms, they caught the candlelight and reflected it back with a faint silver luminescence that no human eyes should possess. Those eyes found her across the length of the church, held her frozen as he began walking down the aisle. His footsteps made no sound. Isolde had met the Duke 3 times during Adrian's courtship. 3 carefully orchestrated encounters at society dinners where he had spoken perhaps a dozen words total his presence, a cold weight at the edge of every conversation. Adrian had called him the family gargoyle, had laughed about his elder brother's inability to smile, to charm, to participate in the easy warmth of human connection. Now the gargoyle was walking toward her, and every person in the church held their breath. He stopped before her, close enough that she could smell cedar and something darker, like earth, from a grave long sealed. His face revealed nothing. No emotion, no warmth, just that terrible, beautiful stillness. Miss Ashford? His voice was low, precise, each syllable measured like a countdown. I bear news from my brother. Don't say it. Please don't say it. He will not be coming. The words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water. Behind her, a woman gasped. A man coughed. The whispers erupted into a roar that Isolde could no longer hear because her own blood was rushing too loudly in her ears. Her knees buckled. Strong hands caught her elbows before she fell. The Duke's grip was firm, impersonal, but cold. So cold. Like touching marble that had spent winter underground. Breathe, he commanded. Somehow she obeyed. Where is he? The question scraped from her throat. Where did he go? North, to Scotland, perhaps farther. Lucian's eyes never left her face. The destination is irrelevant. Irrelevant, Isolde's voice cracked. I am standing at an altar in front of 300 people wearing a wedding gown for a wedding that will not happen, and you tell me it's irrelevant. Something shifted behind those gray eyes. Not warmth, something harder to name. What I tell you, Miss Ashford, is that my brother is a coward. He has placed you in an impossible position, and he did so knowing the consequences. The Duke's gaze swept across the watching crowd. These people will feast on your humiliation for years. Your family's reputation will not survive. Your prospects are destroyed. Each word was a hammer blow. He was right. Isolde knew he was right. By tomorrow morning, her name would be poison. The foolish girl who believed a nobleman actually wanted her. The desperate daughter of a bankrupt family who had reached too high and fallen too far. Unless, Lucian said, Isolde's breath caught. Unless his hands were still on her elbows. His eyes, gray as winter storms, held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken despite the cold radiating from his skin. Unless you marry me instead. The world stopped making sense. Outside through the western windows, the last sliver of sun vanished below the horizon. The church plunged into darkness for one heartbeat too, before the candles flared back to life with twice their previous brightness. I beg your pardon, Isolde whispered. You heard me clearly. His voice remained steady, utterly calm. Marry me, tonight, now before the moon rises fully, transform scandal into spectacle. You cannot be serious. I am always serious, Miss Ashford. His grip tightened fractionally. I am offering you salvation. The alternative is to walk out of this church alone, past 300 witnesses, who will ensure your ruin spreads across England before morning. Isolde searched his face for any sign of mockery, any hint that this was cruelty disguised as rescue. She found nothing but cold, implacable resolve and something else, something that flickered behind his eyes like distant lightning, hunger. Why buy it? The question burst from her. Why would you do this? My reasons are my own. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you now. He glanced toward the windows where darkness pressed against the glass. But you must decide quickly. We have very little time. Time for what? To complete the ceremony before midnight. The curse, he stopped himself, jaw tightening. There are conditions that must be met. What curse? What conditions? Marry me and I will explain everything. His eyes held hers. Refuse and you walk into ruin with nothing but questions. Isolde looked past him at the assembled guests, saw the eagerness in their faces, the anticipation of scandal, the way they leaned forward like vultures circling. Saw her mother's tear-streaked face in the family pew. Her father's shoulders bowed under the weight of debts this wedding was meant to resolve. Her younger sisters clutching each other, their futures tied to hers. She thought of Adrian, who had fled without even the courage to face her. She thought of all the years ahead, marked by whispers and pity, and doors that would close forever. She thought of the alternative, standing before her, a man she barely knew, cold as death, offering her something that felt less like rescue and more like falling from one darkness into another. But it was a choice, the only one she had. If I say yes, Isolde said slowly, what happens then? Then we proceed. Lucian glanced toward the vicar who stood frozen with his prayer book clutched to his chest. The ceremony continues. The guests witness a wedding. You become the Duchess of Ravenscar, and no one will dare pity you again. The Duchess of Ravenscar. The title felt impossible, like trying to wear a crown made for someone else's head. And after, she whispered, after the ceremony, after you come to Ravenscar Hall as my wife. His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. You will have your own chambers, your own household, your own life. I will make no demands of you that you do not wish to fulfill. Something passed through his gaze, too quick to identify. I can be a cold husband, Miss Ashford. I will not pretend warmth I do not possess. But I will never abandon you at an altar. I will never make you a fool before witnesses. That much I promise. It was not a declaration of love. It was not even kindness. But standing in the wreckage of her dreams, wearing a gown meant for another man's promises, Isolde found it was enough. Yes, she heard herself say, I will marry you. The Duke released her elbows at last. Without their support, she swayed slightly, but forced herself steady. He turned to face the congregation, his voice carrying through the church with unnatural clarity. We will proceed. The ceremony that followed lived in Isolde's memory as something fragmented and strange, like watching herself from a great distance. The vicar fumbled through his prayer book with trembling hands. The liturgy had to be adjusted, names changed, the license that had been prepared for Adrian hastily amended for Lucian. Through it all, the Duke of Ravenscar stood beside her like a statue, an anchor and an enigma. Isolde heard her own voice reciting vows that felt too large for her mouth, to have and to hold, for better or worse, in darkness and in light, until true death do us part. The words that should have bound her to Adrian now bound her to this stranger. This cold, powerful man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to speak. When he took her hand to slide on the ring, his skin was so cold it burned. The ring itself was white gold set with a single sapphire that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. It had belonged to his mother, he murmured. The fit was perfect, as though it had been made for her finger alone. With this ring I thee wed, Lucian said, and his voice never wavered. The vicar pronounced them man and wife. Lucian leaned down, and for one frozen moment, Isolde thought he would kiss her lips. Instead, his mouth brushed her cheek in a gesture so brief and formal, it barely counted as contact. But even that small touch sent ice racing down her spine. It was done. Isolde Ashford was now Isolde Blackwood, Duchess of Ravenscar, and she had no idea what price she had just agreed to pay. The wedding breakfast that followed was mercifully brief. The food had been prepared for a different groom, the toasts written for a different couple, but everything proceeded as though this had been the plan all along. Isolde smiled until her face ached, accepted congratulations that ranged from genuine to incredulous, and tried not to notice the way people looked at her husband, because they did look. Everyone looked at Lucian Blackwood with the wary fascination reserved for predators. He moved through the crowd like a shark through still water, exchanging minimum pleasantries, deflecting questions about Adrian with icy finality. And he never strayed far from Isolde's side. People are staring, she murmured, during a rare moment of relative privacy. Let them stare. His hand rested at the small of her back that touched light but proprietary. By tomorrow they will have constructed a dozen romantic narratives to explain tonight. Let them believe whatever fiction brings them comfort. And what is the truth? He looked down at her, his gray eyes unreadable in the candlelight. The truth is rarely as interesting as the story Duchess. The title in his mouth sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. When her mother appeared, fresh tears streaming, Isolde allowed herself to be pulled into an embrace that smelled of rosewater and relief. My darling girl, her mother whispered, I do not understand what has happened, but you are safe now, protected. She pulled back, clasping Isolde's hands. A duchess. My daughter a duchess. Isolde tried to summon a reassuring smile. It is rather overwhelming. Your Grace. Her mother turned to Lucian, sinking into a curtsy so deep it was almost a genuflection. I cannot express our gratitude. When Adrian did not, Madam. Lucian's voice was not unkind, but it permitted no further discussion. Your daughter has had an exhausting evening. We must depart for Ravenscar Hall before the hour grows too late. Too late for what Isolde wanted to ask, but her mother was already squeezing her hands one final time, eyes bright with tears, and something that looked like awe. The carriage waiting outside was black lacquer, pulled by 4 matched gray horses that looked as cold and elegant as their master. A footman in unfamiliar livery helped Isolde inside. She sank onto velvet cushions that probably cost more than her family's entire annual income. Lucian settled across from her, his long legs stretched out, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the window as the carriage lurched into motion. Silence filled the space between them. Isolde studied her new husband in the dim light of the carriage lamps. He was handsome in the way that cliffs were handsome. Impressive. Forbidding. Not something you approached without caution. His jaw could have been carved from granite. His mouth was set in a line that suggested smiling was a concept he had heard of but never attempted. And his skin. Even in the warm glow of lamplight, it remained impossibly pale, almost luminescent. You are staring, he said without looking at her. Heat flooded Isolde's cheeks. Forgive me, I was simply wondering what manner of man I have married. Now he did turn, and something that might have been dark amusement stirred in his expression. A fair question given the circumstances. You must admit the circumstances are unusual. They are unprecedented. He inclined his head slightly. And yet, here we are. Here we are, Isolde echoed. She twisted the unfamiliar ring on her finger, watching the sapphire catch and reflect the lamplight with unnatural brilliance. The stone seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. May I ask you something, Your Grace? You may ask. Whether I answer remains to be seen. Where is Adrian? Where did he truly go? And why? The amusement vanished from Lucian's face, replaced by something harder, colder. He was silent for so long that Isolde thought he would not answer at all. My brother, he said finally, has fled because he is a coward, but not in the way you think. What does that mean? It means there are things about the Blackwood family that Adrian could not face. Responsibilities he was not strong enough to shoulder. Lucian's eyes found hers in the darkness. He ran to protect you from himself. In his own twisted way, he thought he was being merciful. Merciful. Isolde could not keep the bitterness from her voice. To abandon me without a word, to humiliate me before all of society. Yes, the single word was flat final. Because the alternative would have been worse. What alternative, what could possibly be worse than what he did? Lucian turned back to the window. You will understand soon enough, Duchess. For now know that my brother made the only choice his nature would allow. It was not an answer, but something in his voice, some thread of emotion carefully suppressed, told Isolde there were depths to this story she had not yet glimpsed. The carriage climbed into hills she did not recognize. The moon, full and heavy, rose above the tree line ahead of them. Its light was strange tonight, not silver but faintly red, or as though it had absorbed the sunset's violence. A blood moon. Isolde had heard of them but never seen one. Old wives' tales claimed they brought change transformation omens of things to come. Looking at that crimson sphere hanging in the sky like a warning, she could almost believe it. The carriage crested a final hill and Isolde's breath stopped. Ravenscar Hall rose from the landscape like something out of a Gothic nightmare. Gray stone towers pierced the sky, their peaks lost in low-hanging clouds. Hundreds of windows glittered with candlelight, but the glow seemed cold, unwelcoming. The grounds spread in every direction, formal gardens giving way to wild forest that pressed close against the estate's borders. It was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "Welcome home," Lucian said quietly. The carriage wheels crunched on gravel as they approached the main entrance. A line of servants had assembled to greet their new duchess, their faces pale in the moonlight, their uniforms severe and dark. Isolde looked at the impossible house, the silent husband, the life that had been thrust upon her without warning or choice. What had she agreed to? The carriage door opened. A footman offered his hand. Isolde took it, stepping down onto gravel that sparkled strangely in the blood-red moonlight. She was home, though it felt more like stepping into a cage whose bars she had not yet learned to see. The entrance hall of Ravenscar Hall swallowed all warmth. Marble floors stretched in every direction, veined with dark gray and silver that caught the light from chandeliers dripping crystal overhead. But the light itself was cold, giving illumination without comfort. Portraits lined the walls. Stern-faced men and women in clothes from centuries past, their painted eyes following Isolde as she walked. She noticed something strange. In every portrait, the subject's skin held that same impossible pallor, their eyes that same faint luminescence. The Blackwood family, generation after generation, all looking as though they had never seen sunlight. A woman stepped forward from the line of waiting servants. Tall and spare, her gray hair pulled back in a severe knot, she wore black silk that marked her as the housekeeper. Her eyes assessed Isolde with clinical precision. "Your Grace, I am Mrs. Thornfield. Welcome to Ravenscar Hall." "Thank you." Isolde managed, her voice small against the vastness of the space. "Mrs. Thornfield manages the household." Lucian said, his hand settling at Isolde's lower back. The cold touch was somehow steadying. "She will see to anything you require." "The Duchess's chambers have been prepared," Mrs. Thornfield continued, her tone professionally neutral. "Per His Grace's instructions." Per His Grace's instructions. When had there been time for instructions? Adrian had only fled this morning. Yet somehow this house, these servants, these chambers had been prepared for her arrival. As though someone had known this would happen. Lucian guided her toward the grand staircase. Its banister was carved from dark wood that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As they climbed, Isolde noticed something else strange. Not a single mirror hung on any wall, only polished metal surfaces that gave distorted, unreliable reflections. "The windows," Isolde said suddenly, noticing the heavy curtains drawn across every pane of glass. "Why are they all covered?" "The morning sun can be quite harsh," Mrs. Thornfield answered smoothly. "His Grace prefers to control the light." Her chambers were not chambers. They were a suite, a self-contained world of silk and velvet and polished wood. A sitting room overlooked gardens that disappeared into darkness beyond the windows. A dressing room larger than her bedroom at home. And the bedroom itself dominated by a four-poster bed draped in midnight blue fabric, its posts carved with climbing roses and thorns that looked sharp enough to draw blood. "These were my mother's rooms," Lucian said, and something in his voice made Isolde turn to look at him. She died when I was 12. He moved to the fireplace where flames already crackled against the night chill. "These chambers have been closed ever since." The weight of that settled over Isolde like a physical thing. However many years these rooms had been shuttered, preserved in amber, and he had opened them for her. A stranger. A wife claimed out of necessity or pity, or motivations she could not yet name. "That is very generous, Your Grace." "Generosity has nothing to do with it." His voice had returned to its usual coldness. "You are the Duchess of Ravenscar now. These rooms befit the title." Before she could respond, a knock at the door announced a young woman with copper hair and a smattering of freckles across her nose. She curtsied deeply, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Your Grace, I am Tansy. I have been assigned as your lady's maid." "Assigned by whom?" "By His Grace, ma'am." Tansy glanced at Lucian. "This morning. This morning, hours before the wedding, hours before Adrian had fled, before Lucian had stepped in to save her. And yet somehow a lady's maid had already been assigned rooms prepared a life arranged. Isolde looked at her husband, questions burning on her tongue. But he was already moving toward the door. I will leave you to rest. Dinner will be served at 8 tomorrow evening. Tansy will show you to the dining room when you are ready. Tomorrow evening? Isolde could not help the surprise in her voice. Not tomorrow morning. Something flickered across his face. I keep unusual hours, Duchess. You will grow accustomed to them. And he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that felt far too final. Isolde sank onto the edge of the enormous bed, her wedding gown pooling around her like a silk ghost. The room was beautiful, undeniably beautiful, but it felt like standing inside a painting. Lovely to look at, impossible to touch without leaving smudges. Your Grace, Tansy's voice was gentle. Shall I help you change? I can draw a bath if you would like. A bath. When had Isolde last had a proper bath? At home, water had to be heated over the kitchen fire carried upstairs, rationed carefully. Yes, she heard herself say, a bath would be lovely. As Tansy disappeared through a door that led to a private bathing chamber, Isolde wandered the sitting room. Her fingers trailed over furniture that probably cost more than her father's debts, over books with spines too beautiful to crack, over a writing desk stocked with paper and ink and sealing wax in deep crimson. Then she noticed something in the dressing room, an emerald gown of velvet and silver embroidery hanging where it had not been before. Beside it, matching slippers, a shawl of impossible softness. Tansy, Isolde called, where did this gown come from? The maid appeared in the doorway. His Grace had it commissioned, ma'am, last week. Last week, before the wedding, before any of this had happened. I do not understand, Isolde whispered. But even as she said it, a terrible suspicion was forming in her mind. How much had the Duke of Ravenscar known? How much had he planned? And what exactly had she married into? Morning arrived wrong. Isolde woke disoriented, uncertain what had pulled her from sleep. The room was too dark. She could see nothing beyond the bed curtains. For a moment, she thought she had woken in the middle of the night, that hours still remained before dawn. Then she heard the rustle of fabric and realized someone was in the room. Good morning, Your Grace. Isolde sat up quickly, her heart hammering as Tansy appeared beside the bed with a tray. Steam curled from a delicate china cup carrying the scent of chocolate. What time is it? Isolde asked. Just past noon, ma'am. Noon. She had slept half the day away. At home, she would have been up with the dawn, helping with household tasks, making herself useful. Here, apparently, duchesses slept until noon and were brought chocolate in bed. I have brought your breakfast. Tansy continued, setting the tray across Isolde's lap. Mrs. Thornfield says the Dowager Duchess will receive you at 3. The Dowager Duchess. His Grace's grandmother, ma'am, Lady Morgana. She does not live in the main house. She has her own wing on the east side. Tansy hesitated, clearly wrestling with discretion. She wishes to meet you. Something in the maid's careful tone suggested this was not optional. Of course, Isolde said. What should I expect? Tansy leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Lady Morgana is particular, Your Grace. She had certain expectations regarding His Grace's marriage. The circumstances of your wedding were not what she anticipated. Isolde nearly laughed at the understatement. I imagine not. Just be honest with her, ma'am. She respects truth even when she does not like what she hears. Armed with this dubious reassurance, Isolde allowed herself to be dressed in a morning gown of soft rose. At precisely 3 o'clock, a footman escorted her through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate, finally depositing her before a door of carved oak bearing the Blackwood family crest. The room beyond was a study in controlled elegance, pale blue walls, silver fixtures, furniture that managed to be both delicate and somehow threatening. And at its center, seated in a chair that might as well have been a throne, was Lady Morgana Blackwood. She was ancient, perhaps 80, though age had only refined her rather than diminished her. White hair swept up in an elaborate style, bones sharp beneath papery skin, and eyes the same gray as her grandson's, but somehow colder. She wore black silk and pearls, and she examined Isolde with the detached interest of a scientist studying an unusual specimen. So, her voice was surprisingly strong. You are the young woman who was abandoned at the altar and somehow emerged as Duchess of Ravenscar. No greeting, no pleasantries. Isolde's spine straightened. I am my lady. Sit. Isolde sat in the indicated chair, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. Tell me about yourself, Lady Morgana commanded. Not the polished version you would offer at a dinner party. The truth. It was the last thing Isolde had expected. She drew a careful breath. My father is a gentleman of modest means who made unfortunate investments. My mother is the daughter of a country vicar. We have no great connections, no impressive fortune, no particular claim to significance. She met Lady Morgana's eyes directly. I was engaged to your grandson, Adrian, because he found me tolerable and my family was desperate enough not to question his motives. I stood at that altar believing I was securing my family's future. Instead, I was publicly humiliated, and then the Duke appeared. And you accepted his proposal. I had no other choice. There is always a choice, child. Lady Morgana leaned forward slightly. Why did you truly say yes? Isolde considered lying, offering some pretty fiction about gratitude or admiration. But Tansy's advice echoed in her mind. She respects truth. Because I had nowhere else to go, Isolde said quietly, because my family would have been ruined, and because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, because when he looked at me, it was the first time anyone had looked at me as though I were worth saving. A flash of recognition crossed Lady Morgana's ancient eyes. Did he tell you why he did it? No, my lady. And you did not demand to know. I did not have the luxury of demands. Lady Morgana was silent for a long moment, her gaze boring into Isolde with unnerving intensity. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. My grandson has been frozen since his mother died. Longer, perhaps. His father was never warm to begin with. She paused. Lucian has spent decades building walls so high that no one can scale them. Not me, not his brother, not any of the suitable young ladies I have paraded before him. Isolde was not certain how to respond. And then last night, Lady Morgana continued, he did something utterly unprecedented. He intervened. He acted. He claimed a bride in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. The old woman leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Do you know what I think, Duchess? No, my lady. I think my grandson saw something in you, something that cracked through that ice for the first time in a very long time. I do not know what it was. Perhaps you do not either. But I intend to discover the truth. The words should have felt like a threat. Instead, they felt like a puzzle piece Isolde had not known she was missing. I have no intention of hurting him, she said quietly, if that is your concern. Hurt him, Lady Morgana laughed, a dry sound like rustling parchment. My dear girl, I am not worried about you hurting Lucian. She rose, signaling the interview's end. I am worried about what will happen when he finally allows himself to feel something and discovers he does not know how to handle it. She moved toward the door, then paused. There is something you should know about our family, Duchess. We are not quite what we appear. Isolde's heart skipped. I do not understand. You will. Lady Morgana's hand rested on the door handle. Sooner than any of us anticipated, I suspect. She turned back, her expression unreadable. Welcome to the family, child. Try not to be frightened by what you discover. The days at Ravenscar Hall passed like a fever dream. Isolde woke each afternoon to chocolate and whispers. She learned the rhythms of a house that lived backwards. Silent mornings, empty afternoons. Then as twilight fell, the estate would wake. Candles would bloom in every window. Footsteps would echo through corridors. And somewhere in the vastness of Ravenscar Hall, her husband would emerge from whatever darkness he inhabited during daylight hours. She rarely saw him. Dinners were served at 8 in the evening in a room designed for 30 guests. Isolde sat at one end of an impossibly long table. Lucian sat at the other, a distance that felt deliberate. They exchanged polite observations about weather, about the estate, about nothing that mattered. Servants moved between them like ghosts, silent and pale. After dinner, Lucian would retire to his study. Isolde would return to her chambers. The space between them remained carefully preserved. But things appeared. A book of poetry on her sitting room table on the second morning, its spine cracked in just the way she preferred, with a ribbon marking a particular verse about resilience and thorns. Winter roses appeared on her breakfast tray each day, though the gardens outside were barren. Jewelry materialized in her dressing room overnight. A cashmere wrap draped over her favorite library shared the exact shade of blue she had admired once in a fashion plate. And always that sense of being watched. On the fourth day, Isolde decided to explore. Ravenscar Hall was a labyrinth. Corridor branched into other corridors. Staircases led to wings that seemed to exist outside normal geography. She found a music room with instruments covered in dust. A conservatory where exotic plants grew in the gloom, their leaves an unnatural shade of deep crimson. And then she found the portrait gallery. It stretched the length of an entire wing. The brass plaques identified each subject: Aldrich Blackwood, 16 to 23, Theodosia Blackwood, 1701, Marcus Blackwood, 1785. Generation after generation of stern faces and expensive clothing. But it was the faces themselves that stopped Isolde's breath. They all looked the same. Not identical, but close enough to be unsettling. The same sharp cheekbones, the same pale skin, the same eyes that seemed to follow her as she walked. And in portrait after portrait, she noticed details that should not have been possible. No shadows fell correctly. No light reflected naturally from their painted eyes. It was as though the artist had been painting something that existed between life and death and had struggled to capture both. And then she reached the end of the gallery. The final portrait was dated 1823. The subject was identified as Lucian Blackwood, Duke of Ravenscar. The painting showed a man in his early 30s, dark-haired and severe, dressed in the fashion of nearly a century past. The face was identical to the man she had married 4 days ago. Isolde stood frozen before the portrait, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. It could not be the same man. That was impossible. This portrait was painted more than 80 years before her birth. The subject would be long dead. Unless. You found the gallery. Isolde spun around, her heart hammering. Lucian stood in the doorway, backlit by candles from the corridor. In the dim light of the gallery, his face was all shadows and sharp angles, his eyes catching the candlelight with that strange silver reflection. This portrait, Isolde managed. The date must be wrong. Or perhaps it is your grandfather. The resemblance is remarkable. Lucian walked toward her slowly. The date is correct, and that is not my grandfather. He stopped beside her, looking up at his own painted face. In the flickering light, she could see no difference between the man in the portrait and the man standing beside her. None at all. I do not understand, Isolde whispered. No, Lucian said quietly, but you are beginning to suspect. He turned to face her fully. In the gallery's gloom, his skin seemed to glow faintly, as though lit from within by something that was not quite life. Come with me, Duchess. There is something you need to see. He led her through corridors she had not yet discovered, down staircases that descended into the earth beneath Ravenscar Hall. The air grew colder with each step. The stone walls pressed closer. Candles burned in iron sconces, their flames bending away from Lucian as he passed. They emerged into a chamber that might have been a crypt. Stone arches supported a vaulted ceiling. The walls were lined with shelves holding books so old their spines had crumbled to dust. In the center of the room stood a table covered in leather-bound journals, maps marked with unfamiliar territories, and objects Isolde could not name. My mother studied, Lucian said. She was a scholar before she became a duchess. She studied things that most people prefer to dismiss as superstition. He moved to one of the shelves and withdrew a book. The cover was unmarked leather, dark with age. He set it on the table and opened it to a page marked with a black ribbon. Read, he commanded. Isolde stepped closer, her hands trembling as she looked down at the page. The text was in English, but the language was archaic, the handwriting elaborate. She struggled to make sense of the words. The creature commonly known as the vampire, she read aloud, exists in the space between life and death. Neither fully mortal nor entirely spirit, it sustains itself on the blood of the living. It possesses strength beyond human capacity, speed that defies natural law, and a lifespan that can extend for centuries provided it continues to feed. Her voice failed. She looked up at Lucian, waiting for him to laugh, to tell her this was some elaborate jest. His face remained utterly serious. Keep reading, he said. The vampire, Isolde continued, her voice barely a whisper, cannot tolerate prolonged exposure to sunlight, cannot see its reflection in mirrors, cannot cross running water without assistance, cannot enter a dwelling uninvited by those who reside within. It can survive on animal blood, though human blood grants greater strength. It can be killed by stake through the heart, by beheading, or by holy water, blessed by true faith. And it can compel the weak-willed, though it cannot create genuine love where none exists. She closed the book with shaking hands. This is folklore, ghost stories told to frighten children. Is it? Lucian moved closer. Tell me, Duchess, have you seen me during daylight hours? Have you noticed any mirrors in this house? Did you invite me into the church the night we wed? Or did I wait at the threshold until the vicar bid me enter? Isolde's breath came short and fast. Her mind raced through the past days, cataloging every strange detail she had dismissed or rationalized. The covered windows, the absent mirrors, the way Lucian moved too quickly, too silently, the inhuman coldness of his skin, the way his eyes reflected light like an animal's, the way servants spoke of him as though he had been Duke for far longer than any human lifetime should allow. No, she said, this is not possible. And yet it is true. Lucian's voice was steady, almost gentle. I am 234 years old, Duchess. I was turned into what I am when I was 34. I have been Duke of Ravenscar for longer than your country has been a nation. He reached up slowly, giving her time to step away. When she did not move, he touched her hand. His fingers were ice against her skin. I am a vampire, and you are my wife. The room spun. Isolde's knees buckled. Lucian caught her before she fell, his arms impossibly strong, lowering her carefully into a chair. Breathe, he commanded. I know this is difficult to accept. Difficult. Isolde's laugh was half a sob. You are telling me that creatures from nightmares are real, that you are one of them, that I have married a monster. Pain flickered across his face, so brief she might have imagined it. Yes, he said simply. I am a monster. I have been one for a very long time. And Adrian, the question burst from her. Lucian interrupted. Our mother was human when she bore him. She was turned afterward, but the change came too late to affect Adrian fully. He is something between human and vampire. Neither one thing nor the other. Every full moon bloodlust surges through him. That is why he ran from the wedding. He was protecting you from himself. Isolde's mind was a chaos of thoughts, each more terrible than the last. The wedding. You said we had to complete it before midnight. You said there was a curse. Yes. Tell me. Tell me everything. Lucian moved to the table, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was low, careful, as though each word cost him something. My father was turned 3 centuries ago. He turned my mother when they married. They had me, and I was born human, but I was changed when I reached adulthood. It is our way. The Blackwood line has been vampire for 300 years. He turned to face her. My father's will contained a clause. A curse, perhaps, or a test. I must find a bride who is blood-matched to me and complete a bonding before the 35th anniversary of his death. That anniversary is 31 days from the night we wed. Blood-matched, Isolde whispered. What does that mean? It means your blood is genetically compatible with mine. One person in perhaps 10,000 carries the markers necessary for successful conversion. I have searched for 200 years and found only 3 before you. All refused. All chose death over immortality with me. He took a step toward her. If I fail to bond with a blood-matched bride before the deadline, 3 things will happen. I will revert to human and die within hours. Adrian will transform fully into vampire but without control. He will become feral, driven only by hunger. And the curse will spread outward from Ravenscar Hall like a plague, turning everyone within 10 miles into mindless feeding things. The weight of it crashed over Isolde. Thousands of lives, an entire region, all dependent on her agreeing to become a monster. So you chose me, she said numbly. You found me, tested my blood somehow, and when Adrian was courting me, you were really... I was watching you, Lucian finished, learning you, falling in love with someone I could never have because you were promised to my brother. Isolde's head snapped up. What did you say? I said I fell in love with you. His voice was rough now, unsteady. I used vampire compulsion to plant the idea of proposing in Adrian's mind. I orchestrated your courtship because I needed you close. But somewhere in those 6 months of watching you endure my brother's carelessness, of seeing you smile despite his cruelty, of listening to your laugh when you thought no one was paying attention. He stopped, jaw clenched. I stopped seeing you as a solution to a problem. You became everything I wanted and could not have. So when I suspected Adrian would run, when I saw him struggling with his own transformation, fighting the bloodlust he could not control, I prepared. I commissioned that dress. I opened my mother's chambers. I arranged for Tansy. I did everything necessary so that when he fled, I could save you. You mean trap me, Isolde said coldly. Yes. He did not flinch from the accusation. I needed you to save thousands of lives, but I wanted you for myself. I am a monster in every sense, Duchess. I have orchestrated your entire life for the past 6 months to serve my own ends. Silence fell between them, heavy as stone. Isolde's mind was a storm of emotion. Rage at the manipulation, terror at what he was, and beneath it all, something she could not name. Something that whispered she had known. That some part of her had recognized the wrongness in him from the beginning and had chosen him anyway. Show me, she said finally. Show you what your true nature. If I am to make a choice, I must see all of you. Lucian's eyes widened slightly. Then slowly he nodded. The transformation was subtle at first. His eyes brightened, shifting from gray to silver that glowed with its own light. His skin, already pale, took on an otherworldly luminescence. And when he opened his mouth, fangs descended from his upper jaw, sharp and white as bone. But it was his presence that changed most. The careful humanity he wore like a cloak fell away, revealing something ancient and powerful and utterly inhuman. He was beautiful in the way that storms were beautiful. Dangerous and compelling and impossible to look away from. This is what I am, he said, and even his voice had changed, carrying harmonics that made something in Isolde's chest resonate. This is the monster you married. Isolde stood on trembling legs. She walked toward him slowly, her heart hammering, but her steps sure. She stopped close enough to feel the cold radiating from his skin. You are a monster, she agreed quietly, but you are also the only person who has ever looked at me and seen someone worth saving, worth centuries of waiting, worth risking everything. She reached up and touched his face. He flinched as though her warmth burned him. I do not forgive you for the manipulation. I may never forgive you, but I understand why you did it. Her thumb traced the sharp line of his cheekbone. And if I must become what you are to save thousands of lives, then teach me. Help me understand what I am agreeing to. Something in his eyes shifted. Hope fragile as frost. You are not afraid. I am terrified, Isolde said honestly, but I was terrified standing at that altar too. Fear seems to be my constant companion these days. The ghost of a smile touched his mouth, fangs glinting. Then let me show you what immortality looks like, Duchess, and you can decide if it is worth the price. The days that followed were strange and wonderful and terrible. Lucian taught her about the vampire world with the care of a scholar and the intensity of a man running out of time. 27 days remained until the deadline. 27 days to make her decision. He showed her the estate's true nature. The servants were not human, but half-vampires like Adrian thralls, who had chosen this half-life in exchange for extended years. Mrs. Thornfield had served the Blackwood family for 60 years and would serve for 60 more. Tansy had been dying of consumption when Lucian's mother had offered her another choice. He took her hunting in the forest beyond Ravenscar Hall, teaching her to track the deer that moved through the darkness. She watched him feed swift and clean the animal feeling no pain. Watched him heal its wounds with vampire venom so it could run free again. We do not kill without necessity, he explained. We are predators, but we can choose to be merciful ones. The Blackwood family maintains agreements with nearby hospitals purchasing blood that would otherwise be discarded. Human blood grants greater strength, but we need it only once a month. No one need die to feed us. He demonstrated his abilities. The speed that made him blur across distances, the strength that allowed him to lift stone as though it weighed nothing. The enhanced senses that meant he could hear Isolde's heartbeat from 3 rooms away, could smell her unique scent in a crowded ballroom, could track her anywhere in the world if he chose. You would gain all of this, he said one night as they stood in the gardens. But you would lose the sun, lose the ability to age alongside your family, lose your human warmth. And gain what, Isolde asked. Eternity, centuries to learn anything you wish, to see how the world changes, to never fear death or disease or the frailty of human flesh. He stopped walking, turning to face her. To be with me if you want that. Though I would understand if you do not. Isolde looked at him in the moonlight. The cold, distant Duke who had rescued her was gone. In his place stood a man who looked at her as though she were the only light in his long darkness. I think, she said slowly, that I am beginning to want that very much. They danced in the empty ballroom at midnight, Lucian's supernatural strength, allowing him to lift her effortlessly, to spin her faster than any human partner could manage. She laughed, breathless and dizzy, as the world became a blur of candlelight in his silver eyes. I have not danced like this in a century. He set his arms tight around her waist. I had forgotten what joy felt like. And they talked, hours upon hours in the library and the gardens in her sitting room, as fire crackled and night deepened. He told her about the centuries he had lived, the changes he had witnessed, the loneliness that had calcified into something hard and cold until he had convinced himself he preferred solitude. And then I saw you, he said one night, his eyes intense in the firelight, at one of Adrian's insufferable dinner parties. You were trying so hard to be what he wanted, to smile through his dismissiveness, to be small enough not to threaten his pride. And I thought, he stopped jaw tight. You thought what, Isolde prompted. I thought that if I ever had the chance, I would make you feel vast, important, seen. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I thought I would spend eternity making you understand that you were extraordinary exactly as you were. Isolde's breath caught. She was sitting beside him on the sofa close enough that she could feel the cold emanating from his skin, close enough to see the silver threading through his gray eyes. Lucian, she whispered. He turned to her, and the walls he had maintained so carefully for 2 centuries crumbled entirely. I have loved you since the moment I first caught your scent. He said the words fierce and desperate. You smell like sunlight and growing things like everything I cannot have. I have loved you through 6 months of torment watching you with my brother. I have loved you through the wedding and these strange days after. I will love you whether you choose to stay with me or not. Isolde could not breathe, could not think. She reached up and touched his face, felt him shudder beneath her warm fingers. Kiss me, she said. His eyes flashed bright silver. If I kiss you, will not want to stop. Then do not stop. He kissed her, and the world fell away. His mouth was cold against hers, but there was nothing cold about the way he kissed. It was desperate and hungry and achingly tender all at once. His hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. She pressed against him, her warmth meeting his cold, and felt him groan against her mouth. When his fangs grazed her lower lip, she gasped. The sensation was sharp and strange and sent heat flooding through her. She tasted copper, realized he had drawn a tiny bead of blood. Lucian pulled back instantly, his eyes wild. I hurt you. No, Isolde said. You did not. She leaned forward and kissed him again, deeper this time. She felt his fangs against her tongue, the dangerous edge of them, and was not afraid. Quas, he made a sound low in his throat, half growl, half surrender. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, though only she needed air, his forehead rested against hers. I have dreamed of this for so long, he whispered. Of having you, holding you, being allowed to love you. You have me, Isolde said. For whatever time remains, you have me. 3 days of happiness followed. They were inseparable. Lucian showed her secret corners of the estate, taught her to read the old languages his family's journals were written in, played music for her on instruments he had mastered over centuries, made her laugh with stories about the absurdity of watching human society evolve while remaining unchanging himself. And they kissed, often. Every kiss a small revelation, every touch a promise of more to come. On the 18th day since their wedding, Isolde woke to find a note beside her chocolate. Meet me in the rose garden at midnight. I have something to show you. She spent the day in pleasant anticipation, allowed Tansy to dress her in the green velvet gown Lucian had commissioned, and descended to the gardens as the clock struck 12. Lucian stood among the winter roses, moonlight turning him to living marble. But it was not the sight of him that stopped Isolde's breath. The roses were blooming impossibly. Not the sparse winter flowers she had grown used to, but thousands upon thousands of blossoms in shades of crimson and white and deepest black. They covered every bush, every trellis, every inch of garden space. How, she whispered. My blood, Lucian said simply. I have been feeding it to the roots for 2 weeks. Vampire blood has certain properties. It can heal, preserve, make things grow beyond their natural season. He walked to her through the impossible garden. I wanted to give you beauty, to show you that darkness can create as well as destroy. Isolde looked at the flowers, then at him, at this ancient creature who had orchestrated her life and still found ways to surprise her with tenderness. I have decided, she said. His whole body went still. Decided, I will undergo the conversion. I will become what you are. She took his cold hands in her warm ones, not because of the curse, not to save thousands of lives, though that matters. I will do it because I love you. Because the thought of growing old and dying while you remain unchanged isn't unbearable. Because I want forever with you. For a moment, Lucian simply stared at her. Then he dropped to his knees in the rose garden, his arms wrapping around her waist, his face pressed against her stomach. You are certain, his voice was muffled against her gown. You understand what you are giving up. I understand. She ran her fingers through his dark hair. And I choose you anyway. He stood lifting her effortlessly and kissed her with something like reverence. The roses bloomed brighter around them, fed by the joy of a vampire who had finally found his home. But joy, Isolde would learn, was the most fragile thing in the world. The invitation arrived on the 19th day. Mrs. Thornfield brought it to Isolde's chambers personally, her face grave. The envelope was expensive vellum, sealed with wax, the color of old blood. Lady Petersham requests the honor of your presence, Isolde read aloud. A winter ball to celebrate the season. Tomorrow evening. His Grace has already sent regrets, Mrs. Thornfield said. He does not attend such events. Because of the daylight travel required, Isolde said, understanding. Yes, Your Grace. But something about the invitation troubled Isolde. She turned it over, studying the seal. There was something odd about the wax, a symbol pressed into it that she did not recognize. 3 circles intersecting to form a triangle. What is this symbol? She asked. Mrs. Thornfield's face went pale. I do not know, Your Grace. Perhaps His Grace can explain. But when Isolde showed the invitation to Lucian that evening, his reaction was immediate and violent. He crushed the paper in his fist, his eyes flashing silver with fury. You are not going, he said flatly. I was not planning to attend. But what is that symbol? A warning. He threw the crumpled invitation into the fire. Someone knows what we are. Someone is hunting us. Fear coiled cold in Isolde's stomach. Who? I do not know, but we must be careful. Do not leave the estate grounds. Do not speak to strangers. And especially do not... A scream cut through the night. It came from somewhere in the house, high and terrified. Lucian moved instantly, too fast for Isolde to follow. She ran after him, her heart pounding, following the sound of shouting and chaos. They found Tansy in the entrance hall, backed against the wall, staring at the open front door. A man stood on the threshold. Tall and lean, dressed in the black of a priest with iron gray hair and eyes that burned with fervent certainty. But there was something wrong about him. His skin held a faint pallor that was neither fully human nor fully vampire. His presence made the air feel thick, poisoned. Duke Blackwood, oh, the man said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Or should I say creature, monster, demon wearing a dead man's face? Lucian positioned himself between the priest and Isolde. You are not welcome in this house. I do not need welcome. The priest stepped across the threshold as though it caused him pain, but he did not stop. His movement was too fast, too strong for a normal human. I carry holy purpose. I am Father Marcus Sullivan, and I have come to save the souls you have damned. He raised his hand, and Isolde saw he held something, a vial of water that caught the candlelight with prismatic brilliance. Holy water, Lucian said, his voice tight. Blessed by a true believer. It can harm me. It can do more than harm you, demon. Father Sullivan's eyes found Isolde, and she noticed they held a faint luminescence. Something was not right about this priest, and I have come to free this innocent woman from your grasp. She is my wife, Lucian growled. She is your victim. Sullivan took another step forward, moving with unnatural speed. But I can save her. I can save you all if you surrender to God's mercy. I have no interest in mercy from your God or from you. Then you will burn. Sullivan's hand tightened on the vial. I know what you are planning. I know about the blood matching, the conversion, the curse your father laid on this land. His eyes were wild now, fanatical. I know everything because Adrian told me. Isolde's blood turned to ice. Adrian, Sullivan smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Your husband's dear brother came to me 3 days ago, told me everything about your wicked family, about the monsters you truly are, and he asked for my help to free you before you become one of them. He gestured toward the door, and another figure stepped into the entrance hall. Adrian Blackwood looked thinner than Isolde remembered. His golden hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled, his eyes haunted. But it was the expression on his face that broke something in Isolde's chest. Shame, guilt, and desperate, futile hope. Isolde, Adrian said, his voice hoarse. I am so sorry for everything, but I can make it right. Father Sullivan can purify Lucien, free him from this curse. You do not have to become a monster. You can be human. You can be safe. I am safe, Isolde said, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. You are ensorcelled, Sullivan countered. Vampires have the power to compel, to make you believe you love them when it is only their venom clouding your mind. He looked at Lucian with contempt, and Isolde noticed something strange. The way Sullivan moved, the faint glow in his eyes, the too quick reflexes. He was not fully human. Did you think I would not discover the truth? Sullivan continued. I have hunted your kind for 30 years. I know every trick, every law, and I know about the clause in your father's will. Lucian went absolutely still. You must convert a blood-matched bride before the 35th anniversary of your father's death. Sullivan continued, triumph in his voice. But the will states more than that, does it not? It states that the bride must consent without coercion, without compulsion, without any influence from vampire power. He pulled a folded document from his coat, yellowed with age. I found the original will in the church archives, and I found the amendments your family tried to hide. He unfolded the paper with slow ceremony. The clause states that if the bride is converted against her true will, if any compulsion is detected, the curse activates immediately. Not just reverting you to human, not just transforming Adrian, but killing every vampire in a 100-mile radius, burning them from the inside out. He looked at Isolde. Tell me, child, did the Duke use his powers on you? Did he compel you to love him, to agree to conversion? Search your heart. Are your feelings truly your own, or are they poison he poured into your mind? Isolde's world tilted. She looked at Lucien, saw the tension in every line of his body, the way his jaw clenched, and she remembered his confession. I used vampire compulsion to plant the idea of proposing in Adrian's mind. If he had compelled Adrian, had he compelled her? Tell her, Sullivan demanded. Tell her the truth, demon. Did you use your powers to make her love you? Lucian's voice was rough. I used compulsion to influence Adrian. But I swear, Isolde, I never used it on you. Never. Everything you felt was real. Can she believe you? Sullivan asked softly. Can she trust the word of a creature that has lied for centuries, that has manipulated her from the moment you met? Isolde's hands were shaking. She pressed them to her stomach, trying to steady herself, trying to think. But doubt had taken root, spreading like poison through her certainty. What if he had compelled her? What if these feelings she thought were real were nothing but venom and manipulation? How could she know? How could she trust anything when her entire life for the past months had been orchestrated by the man who now claimed to love her? She could not finish the sentence, could not think through the chaos in her mind. You need time away from him, Sullivan said gently. Time to clear your mind. Time to feel your own thoughts without his influence. He held out his hand. Come with me, child. Let me help you remember what it means to be human. And then when your mind is your own again, you can decide. Stay with the monster or choose the light. Isolde looked at the offered hand, looked at Adrian, his face pleading, looked at Lucian, his eyes bright with something that might have been fear, or might have been love, or might have been a lie so perfect she could not tell the difference. Isolde, Lucian whispered, please, do not do this. Did you compel me? The question came out broken. At any point, did you use your power to make me feel what I feel? No, I swear on my mother's grave, on everything I have been and everything I am, I never used compulsion on you. But you did use it on Adrian. You admitted that. Yes. How can I know? Tears were streaming down her face now. How can I trust anything when you have been pulling strings from the beginning? Lucian took a step toward her. Sullivan raised the vial of holy water in warning, and Lucian stopped. You know, Lucian said, his voice raw with desperation, because vampire compulsion cannot create love. It can lower inhibitions, plant suggestions, make someone more amenable to ideas they already find acceptable. But it cannot make someone love what they hate, cannot create feelings from nothing. He held her gaze across the distance between them. Search your heart, Isolde. Search your memories, the way you looked at me in the church, the way you agreed to marry a stranger to save yourself, the way you chose to stay when you learned what I was. None of that was compulsion. That was you. That was real. Pretty words, Sullivan said, from a creature that has had centuries to perfect lies. Adrian stepped forward. Isolde, please. I know I hurt you. I know I abandoned you. But I did it to protect you from this, from him, from what our family is. Let me make it right. Let me save you. Isolde's chest was so tight she could barely breathe. She looked at the three men surrounding her, the priest with his holy purpose and his strange, not quite human nature, Adrian with his desperate redemption, and Lucian, her husband, her monster, the man who had given her forever and might have stolen her mind to do it. I need to think, she said. I need time alone. You cannot be alone with him in the house, Sullivan protested. Then I will go to my chambers and lock the door. No one will enter. No one will speak to me. She looked at each of them in turn. I will make my decision by morning. Until then, leave me be. She did not wait for responses. She walked past them all, past Sullivan's triumphant smile, past Adrian's hopeful eyes, past Lucian's breaking heart. She climbed the stairs to her chambers, entered the rooms that had been his mother's, and locked the door with shaking hands. Only then did she allow herself to collapse. Only then did she allow herself to scream. The night pressed against the windows like something alive. Isolde sat on the floor of her chambers, her back against the locked door, and tried to remember how to breathe. Her wedding gown lay abandoned across the room. The emerald dress Lucian had commissioned hung in the shadows like a ghost of promises unmade. Outside, she could hear them. Father Sullivan's voice low and urgent, speaking to Adrian. Footsteps in the corridor, the creak of floorboards as someone paced, and silence from the direction of Lucian's wing. That silence frightened her most of all. She pressed her hands to her spine and tried to think past the chaos in her mind. Had he compelled her? The question circled like a vulture. When she had looked at him in the church, had that pull she felt been her own heart or his vampire influence? When she had agreed to marry him, to love him, to become what he was, had any of it been real? She could not trust her memories, could not trust her feelings, could not trust anything except the terrible doubt that had taken root and spread until she could barely recognize herself beneath its thorns. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher, turned from silver to that strange crimson that had marked her wedding night. A blood moon, she remembered, an omen of transformation. Dawn could not be far away now. Isolde rose on stiff legs and moved to the writing desk. Her fingers trembled as she lit a candle as she pulled out paper and ink. If she could not trust her heart, perhaps she could trust her mind. Perhaps she could reason her way through this maze. She began to write, a list of every interaction with Lucian, every conversation, every gift, every moment she had felt something shift inside her. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the candle burned low, until the words on the page became a map of the past weeks. And slowly a pattern emerged. The gifts had begun before the wedding, before Lucian had any reason to compel her, because she had not been his yet. The dress commissioned a week in advance. The chambers opened. The preparations made not to trap her, but to save her when the moment came. She remembered standing at the altar. Remembered the exact moment Lucian had appeared in the doorway. Remembered her first thought had not been attraction or affection, but relief. Someone had come. Someone had seen her humiliation and chosen to act. No compulsion there, just desperate gratitude. She remembered the dinners where they sat at opposite ends of that endless table, how he had never pushed for more, never demanded closeness, had given her space and time and freedom to choose. And she remembered the library, the moment he had confessed everything, the manipulation, the orchestration, the cold calculation that had brought them together. He had told her the truth when he could have lied, had shown her his monster when he could have hidden behind humanity. Compulsion would have been easier, safer. Why confess at all if he could simply make her forget, make her comply, make her love him without question, unless he wanted her to choose, truly choose, with all the ugly truth laid bare. Isolde set down her pen and stared at the pages covered in her handwriting, at the evidence of a man who had manipulated circumstances but had never not once tried to manipulate her heart. A knock at the door made her jump. "Your Grace," Tansy's voice soft and worried. "I brought chocolate and something else." "Leave it outside," Isolde called. "I think you should see this, ma'am. It is from His Grace." Shh. Isolde opened the door a crack. Tansy stood there with a tray, but beside the chocolate was a single piece of paper folded and sealed with black wax. "He asked me to give this to you at dawn," Tansy said. "Said you would know what it meant." Isolde took the letter with shaking hands. The seal bore the Blackwood crest. She broke it carefully and unfolded the page. The handwriting was the same as in the old journals. Elegant, precise, centuries of practice evident in every stroke. "Isolde," it began. "Not Duchess, not my wife, just her name. I have lived for 234 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched generations of humans live and die while I remained unchanged. I have convinced myself that immortality was a gift, that my nature was something to be managed rather than mourned. I was wrong about everything. The only gift I have ever received in 2 centuries was you. 6 months of watching you from shadows. 3 weeks of having you in my home. 3 days of believing you might choose to stay. Father Sullivan is right about one thing. I am a monster. I orchestrated your courtship. I planted ideas in Adrian's mind. I prepared for your rescue as though I were setting a trap because in many ways I was. But he is wrong about the compulsion. I never used my power on you, not once. Not to make you marry me. Not to make you love me. Not even to make you smile when I desperately wanted to see joy on your face. I wanted every choice you made to be yours. Every feeling to be real. Because I have lived long enough to know that love built on lies, even comfortable ones, is worthless. If you choose to leave with Sullivan, I will not stop you. The curse will activate in 12 days. I will die human as perhaps I should have died 200 years ago. Adrian will transform fully, but Sullivan seems confident he can control him. Perhaps he can. Thousands will die. But they were always going to die eventually. Death comes for everyone except monsters like me. You are not a monster. You deserve to live and age and die as humans do. You deserve sunlight and warmth and all the things I can never give you. I love you enough to let you go. But if there is any part of you that believes what we had was real, if you can find it in your heart to trust that my love is true, even if my methods were not, then come to the crypt before sunset tonight. Come to me freely, without coercion, without fear. Come because you choose this darkness over the light. I will wait for you as long as time allows. Yours in whatever way you will have me, Lucian. Isolde read the letter 3 times, her vision blurred with tears she could not stop. He was giving her permission to leave, to choose the light, to let him die. He was setting her free. She looked up at Tansy, who was trying very hard not to stare. "Where is Father Sullivan now?" "In the guest wing, Your Grace, with Lord Adrian. They are preparing to leave this evening if you choose to go with them." "And His Grace?" "In his study. He has not emerged since last night." Isolde made a decision. "Tansy, I need you to do something for me. Something His Grace must not know about." The maid's eyes widened. "Ma'am, I need access to the family archives, the old documents, especially anything related to Lady Blackwood, the Duke's mother." Understanding dawned on Tansy's face. "Mrs. Thornfield keeps those locked, Your Grace. But I know where she hides the key. Can you get them without being seen?" "For you, ma'am, I would steal the moon itself." An hour later, Isolde sat surrounded by journals, letters, and documents, so old the paper crumbled at her touch. She read through the night, through the morning, through the afternoon. She read the story of a woman named Catherine, who had been something other than human long before she married a duke. Catherine had not been born Blackwood. She had been born Sullivan. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Catherine Sullivan had been a vampire hunter. The best of her generation. She had infiltrated the Blackwood family with the specific mission of destroying them from within. But somewhere in the darkness of Ravenscar Hall, she had fallen in love with the monster she was meant to kill. She had turned, had become vampire herself, had borne a son who inherited her husband's curse fully and another who carried only half the blood. And she had written in journals she hid from everyone about the brother she left behind. A brother named Marcus who had sworn vengeance for her betrayal, who had dedicated his life to destroying the family that had stolen his sister. Marcus Sullivan. Father Sullivan was not a random vampire hunter. He was family, and he had orchestrated everything. Isolde's hands shook as she read Catherine's final entry, dated the day before her death. Marcus has found me. After all these years, my brother has tracked us to Ravenscar. He says he will save me, says he can purify the vampire poison from my blood and make me human again. But I do not want to be saved. I love my husband. I love my sons. I love this dark life I have chosen. Marcus will never understand that. He will see only the monster, not the woman who chose to become one. If you are reading this, it means he has succeeded. It means I am dead and my family is in danger. Do not trust him. Do not believe his promises of redemption. Marcus believes he serves God, but he serves only his own hatred. Protect Lucian. Protect Adrian. And if you can protect whoever comes after me, whoever inherits the role of Duchess in this strange, beautiful darkness, tell her that love is worth any curse. Tell her that I would choose this life, this death, this everything 1,000 times over. Tell her not to be afraid. Isolde closed the journal carefully. Her chest was tight with grief for a woman she had never met. A woman who had slept in these rooms, worn these jewels, loved the same man separated by 2 centuries. Catherine's message was clear. Marcus Sullivan had killed her, and now he had returned to finish what he started. Isolde stood, her decision made. She had 5 hours until sunset, 5 hours to prepare, 5 hours to save the monster she loved. She found Adrian in the library alone. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting with desperate hope. Isolde, thank God. Have you decided, will you come with us? Tell me the truth, Adrian. Isolde's voice was steady despite her racing heart. When did you meet Father Sullivan? How long have you been planning this? Adrian's smile faltered. I do not understand. Yes, you do. She moved closer. Your mother's name was Sullivan before she married. Father Marcus Sullivan is your uncle. You have known him your entire life. The color drained from Adrian's face. Tell me the truth, Isolde repeated, or I will scream and Lucian will be here in seconds. Somehow I do not think your uncle wants that confrontation before sunset. Adrian's shoulders sagged. He suddenly looked much older than his 28 years. He contacted me 6 months ago, he said quietly. Told me he could cure me, make me fully human again. I would not have to transform. Would not have to struggle with bloodlust every full moon. Would not have to live as something between 2 worlds. And all you had to do was deliver me to Lucian. No, Adrian stood abruptly. That was not the plan. I was supposed to marry you. Uncle Marcus said if I married a blood-match bride and refused to let Lucian convert you, the curse would activate and kill Lucian. Then Uncle Marcus would use my mother's research to cure me, and we would be free. But you ran. I ran because I could not do it. Adrian's voice broke. The night before the wedding, the bloodlust hit early. I nearly killed a servant. I realized that if I married you, if I was near you during the transformation, I might hurt you, might kill you. So I fled. I thought I was protecting you. And Father Sullivan was waiting. He said there was another way. That if I helped him expose Lucian for what he truly is, if I brought evidence to the world, Lucian would be forced to flee and you would be safe. I did not know. He stopped shaking his head. I did not know he planned to kill anyone. I thought he just wanted to save you. Isolde studied him. She saw the truth in his face. Adrian was weak, yes. Selfish, certainly. But not evil, just a frightened man manipulated by someone far more dangerous. Your uncle killed your mother, Isolde said quietly. I found her journals. She wrote about him, about how he came to Ravenscar promising to save her, and she refused. So he killed her and made it look like a vampire attack. Adrian's face crumbled. No, that cannot be true. He loved her. He spent his whole life trying to avenge her. He spent his whole life unable to accept that she chose this, that she loved your father more than she feared becoming a monster. Isolde gripped his shoulders. Adrian, your uncle, is not here to save anyone. He is here to destroy the family that took his sister, and he is using you to do it. I do not believe you. Then ask him. Isolde released him. Ask him what really happened the night your mother died. Look him in the eyes and ask him if he killed her. She moved toward the door, then paused. I am going to save Lucien. I am going to stop your uncle. And then I am going to become what your mother was, a vampire who chose love over fear. She looked back at Adrian. You can help me or you can stand aside, but you cannot stop me. She left him there surrounded by books and the ashes of his illusions. The sun was setting when Isolde descended to the crypt. She wore the emerald dress, the sapphire ring, her hair loose around her shoulders the way Lucien preferred. She carried nothing but her courage and the truth she had uncovered. Father Sullivan was waiting at the entrance to the crypt as she had known he would be. He smiled when he saw her, that warm paternal smile that hid so much poison. My child, you have come to say goodbye to the creature before we depart. No, Isolde said. I have come to tell you that I know what you did. I know you killed your sister. I know you are using Adrian. And I know you will fail. Sullivan's smile vanished. You know nothing. I know enough. She moved forward, and he stepped at it reflexively. I know that Catherine loved her family more than her humanity. I know that drove you mad with grief and rage. I know you have spent 30 years hunting vampires because you could not save the one that mattered. I could have saved her. Sullivan's voice echoed off stone walls. I could have purified her. Her blood made her human again. But she refused. She chose that monster over her own brother. She chose love, and you killed her for it. I freed her. His hand went to his coat, pulling out the vial of holy water. I freed her from the corruption, and I will free you too. Isolde heard movement behind her, felt the cold presence that meant Lucien had arrived. But she did not turn, did not take her eyes off Sullivan. You freed her from life, Isolde said quietly, and you have been running from that guilt ever since, hiding behind holy purpose and righteous fury. But the truth is you are just a man who killed his sister and cannot live with what he has done. Silence! Sullivan hurled the vial. Lucien moved, faster than sight. He pulled Isolde behind him as the holy water struck his chest. The liquid burned through fabric, through skin, eating into flesh, with a sound like meat on a hot pan. Lucien made no sound, did not cry out, just stood there shielding Isolde with his body as the blessed water destroyed him. Lucien. Isolde tried to reach for him, but he held her back with one arm. Stay behind me, he gasped. Sullivan was laughing now, pulling out another vial and another. But Isolde noticed his movements were too fast, his strength too great. The faint luminescence in his eyes, the pallor of his skin. You think you can protect her, demon? Sullivan moved with inhuman speed. I have enough holy water to melt you into nothing, and when you are gone, I will take the girl and finish what I started 30 years ago. You will not touch her. The voice came from the crypt entrance. Adrian stood there pale and shaking, holding something in his hands. A wooden stake carved from ash and blessed by hands that had once believed in redemption. Adrian, Sullivan's voice was cajoling now. Son, what are you doing? I am not your son. Adrian moved forward. My father was a vampire duke who loved his human wife. My mother was a hunter who chose darkness because she found light in it. And you killed her because you could not accept that she was happy. I saved her, Joam. You murdered her. Adrian's hand steadied. Isolde showed me the journals. I read Mother's last words. She knew you were coming. She knew you would call it salvation even as you drove the stake into her heart. Sullivan's face contorted with rage and grief. She was poisoned, corrupted. I had no choice. There is always a choice. Adrian looked at Isolde, at his brother. I am making mine now. Sullivan moved faster than a human should have been able to. He grabbed Adrian by the throat, lifting him off the ground with strength that had nothing to do with holy purpose. I drank her blood before she died, Sullivan snarled. Took it into myself, thinking it would poison me, kill me, let me follow her into death. Instead, it changed me. Made me something neither vampire nor human. A hunter with a monster's strength. He threw Adrian against the wall. The young man crumpled, gasping. I have waited 30 years for this, Sullivan continued, advancing on Lucien. 30 years to destroy the family that stole my sister. And now at last I will finish it. He raised a third vial. No, Isolde said. She stepped out from behind Lucien, stood between the two men, looked Sullivan in the eyes without flinching. If you want to destroy this family, you will have to go through me first. Gladly. Sullivan's hand moved to throw. Wait, Isolde's voice cracked like a whip. You said the will requires consent without coercion, that the bride must choose freely. You wanted me to make a real choice, yes, to prove Lucien had not compelled me. What of it? Then let me make it, right here, right now, in front of witnesses. She turned to face Lucien. His chest was still burning where the holy water had struck. His face was tight with pain, but his eyes, those silver eyes, held nothing but love and fear and desperate hope. Lucian Blackwood, Isolde said clearly, I choose you, not because I am compelled, not because I have no other option. I choose you because I love you. Because I have read your mother's words and I understand her choice. Because I would rather have forever in darkness with you than a lifetime in light alone. She held out her hand. Bite me, bond with me, make me yours for eternity. I consent freely. I choose this willingly. I want this more than I have ever wanted anything. Lucian's eyes widened. Isolde, you do not have to do this now. We can wait. We can... No more waiting. She moved closer. Your mother wrote that love is worth any curse. She was right. I am not afraid. You should be. But his hand found hers, cold fingers intertwining with warm. Once I bite you, once we bond, there is no going back. You will lose your humanity forever. Then I will lose it gladly. Behind them, Sullivan screamed in rage and hurled the vial. Lucian spun, pulling Isolde into his arms, shielding her again. The holy water struck his back this time, burning through coat and shirt and flesh. He staggered but did not fall. Now, Isolde gasped against his chest. Do it now before he can stop us. Lucian's eyes met hers. She saw the war in them. The desire, the fear, the love that had waited 200 years and could not wait another moment. Together, he said, we face everything together. He lowered his mouth to her throat. The bite was not gentle. Could not be, with Sullivan attacking and Adrian struggling to his feet and time running out like sand through a broken hourglass. Lucian's fangs pierced her skin in one swift strike, and Isolde felt the pain of it lance through her entire body. Then came the venom. It burned like holy water and ice and transformation all at once. She felt it spreading through her veins, rewriting her humanity cell by cell. Her heart hammered once, twice, 3 times, then began to slow. Her lungs struggled for air that she would soon no longer need. But beneath the pain was something else, a connection forming between herself and Lucian. A bond deeper than marriage, deeper than love, deeper than anything she had imagined possible. She felt his thoughts bleeding into hers, his memories. 200 years of loneliness. Decades of watching the world change while he remained frozen. 6 months of falling in love with a woman who belonged to his brother. 3 weeks of desperate hope that she might choose him despite everything. And she felt his love. Vast and ancient and absolutely certain. A love that had waited centuries and would wait centuries more if necessary. She poured her own feelings back through the bond, her fear, her courage, her choice to leap into darkness because the alternative was losing him. Her love that was new and fragile but absolutely real. The connection blazed between them like a star being born. Power surged, not just Lucian's vampire strength flowing into her, but something more. Something neither of them had expected. The blood anchor bond Lady Morgana had spoken of. 2 souls merging. 2 lives becoming one eternal existence. Light exploded from where they stood. Not the warm light of sun, but cold silver luminescence that filled the crypt like moonlight made solid. Sullivan stumbled backwards, shielding his eyes. Adrian, still slumped against the wall, stared in awe. When the light faded, Isolde and Lucian stood together, transformed. Isolde could feel the change completing. Her heart beat once more, then stopped. Her lungs took one final breath, then stilled. Her body died its small death and was reborn as something other. But she was still herself, still Isolde, just more now, stronger, faster. Her senses exploded with input. She could hear Adrian's racing heartbeat, smell Sullivan's blood pulsing with stolen vampire essence, see in perfect clarity despite the darkness. And she could feel Lucian. Not just physically, though he held her still, arms wrapped tight around her waist. She could feel his presence in her mind and her soul in the very core of her being. We are bonded, his voice whispered in her thoughts. Blood anchored. You are not just vampire now. You are my equal, my partner, my everything, and you are mine, she whispered back. They turned together to face Sullivan. The hunter looked at them with something like horror. No, this is not possible. Blood anchor bonds have not been seen in 500 years. Apparently, Isolde said, and her voice carried harmonics it had never held before. We are bringing them back. She moved forward. Lucian moved with her, perfectly synchronized. They were one being in 2 bodies now, their power combined and amplified. Sullivan raised his final vial. I will destroy you both. No, Adrian said. The young man had risen. He held the ash stake in trembling hands, and he moved faster than he should have been able to, his half-vampire nature finally giving him something useful. He tackled Sullivan from behind. The vial flew from the hunter's hand, shattering harmlessly against the far wall. Sullivan and Adrian struggled, rolling across the stone floor. Sullivan's enhanced strength was overwhelming, but Adrian had surprise on his side. Mother chose love, Adrian shouted. driving the stake towards Sullivan's chest. She chose them, and I choose to honor that choice. Sullivan caught his wrist, stopping the stake inches from his heart. Fool boy, I am saving you. Can you not see that? You are saving nothing but your own twisted need for vengeance. They struggled. Sullivan was stronger. Slowly, inevitably, he forced Adrian back, reversing their positions. The stake turned, now pointed at Adrian's heart. I will free you, Sullivan gasped, even if I must kill you to do it. Then you will have to kill me too. Isolde was there. Moving with vampire speed, she grabbed Sullivan's arm and pulled. Her new strength was overwhelming. She had not learned to control it yet, did not understand the full extent of her power. She pulled too hard. The snap of bone was audible throughout the crypt. Sullivan screamed, his broken arm dangling useless. The stake fell from his nerveless fingers. Adrian caught it. For one suspended moment, nephew and uncle stared at each other. Adrian held the weapon that could end this. End Sullivan. End the threat. I am sorry, Adrian whispered. For mother, for everything you could have been if grief had not destroyed you. He drove the stake into Sullivan's chest. Not the heart, not a killing blow, but enough to pin him to the floor to keep him from moving while his stolen vampire blood fought to heal damage faster than it could manage. But I will not let you hurt my family anymore. Sullivan gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. Catherine, I only wanted to save you. She did not need saving, Isolde said quietly. She just needed to be loved. Sullivan's eyes found hers, and for just a moment the madness cleared. She saw the broken man beneath, the brother who had lost his sister and had never learned how to grieve anything but revenge. Tell me, he whispered, tell me she was happy, that it was worth it. Isolde knelt beside him. I read her journals, every page. She wrote about your childhood together, about missing you, about wishing you could see that she had not been stolen, but had chosen a different path. She touched his unbroken hand. She loved you, but she loved them more. And yes, she was happy, even knowing it would cost her everything. She was happy. Sullivan closed his eyes. A single tear tracked down his face. I see her, in dreams. She is always smiling, always telling me to let go. His voice was fading now, the stake having struck something vital after all. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps it is time. He looked at Adrian. I am sorry, boy. I thought I was saving you. Turns out I was just making you as broken as me. You did not break me, Adrian said, but his voice shook. You just tried. There is a difference, Arsaperis. Sullivan smiled. It was the first genuine expression Isolde had seen on his face. Good. Be better than I was. Choose better. His eyes closed. His breathing stuttered once, twice, then stopped. Father Marcus Sullivan, vampire hunter, died as he had lived, chasing a ghost he could never catch, trying to save a sister who had never needed saving. Adrian stood slowly, staring down at the man he had killed. I did not want this. I know, Lucian said quietly. He moved to his brother's suite, placed a hand on his shoulder. But you chose to protect us anyway. Thank you. Adrian laughed, the sound brittle. What am I now, half vampire who killed a hunter? I do not fit anywhere. You fit here, Isolde said. With us, with your family. She felt the bond with Lucian pulse with agreement. They were blood-anchored now, yes, but that did not mean they had no room for others. Adrian was family, broken and complicated and damaged, but family nonetheless. We will find a way forward, Lucian said. Together, all of us. Adrian nodded, not trusting his voice. They left the crypt together as the moon rose full and red outside. Mrs. Thornfield and the household staff would tend to Sullivan's body. The three of them climbed toward the main house, leaving darkness behind. Isolde felt the transformation completing as they walked. Every step took her further from humanity and deeper into her new nature. But she did not mourn what she was losing. Could not when what she was gaining was so vast. She was vampire now, blood-anchored, eternal, and she had chosen it. Every step, every moment. That was worth any curse. In her chambers that night, as her body settled into its immortal rhythm, Lucian held her close. They lay together in the great bed that had been his mother's, wrapped in darkness and each other. Are you frightened? He whispered. No, Isolde said. I am home. And for the first time in 200 years, Lucian Blackwood smiled. The years passed like pages turning. 50 springs came and went. 50 autumns painted the trees gold. 50 winters blanketed Ravenscar Hall in snow. And through it all, Isolde and Lucien remained unchanged, frozen at the moment of their bonding. But the world around them transformed. Adrian aged gracefully, his half-vampire blood slowing but not stopping time's passage. He married a woman named Clara, who knew what he was and loved him anyway. They had children who carried traces of vampire blood, but remained beautifully, fragilely human. Lady Morgana finally surrendered to the mortality she had chosen 5 decades before. She died in her sleep at 130, whispering that she was going to find her husband at last. Mrs. Domahamas. Thornfield served another 50 years before choosing to rest. Tansy took her place as head of household, still appearing no older than 40 despite the centuries in her veins. And Isolde learned what forever meant. She learned to control her strength, her speed, her hunger. She learned to navigate the intricate politics of vampire society, the ancient families, and their endless feuds. She learned that immortality was both gift and curse, watching the world change while she remained frozen in time. But she learned it all with Lucian beside her. Blood anchored, partners in every sense. The bond between them only grew stronger with passing decades until she could no longer imagine existing without him. On the 50th anniversary of her transformation, Isolde discovered something impossible. She stood in the rose garden on a night when the blood moon rose full and red, one hand pressed to her abdomen, where something stirred, something that should not have been possible. Lucian found her there, wrapped his arms around her from behind his hand, joining hers over the small swell that had begun to show. A child, he whispered, awe in his voice. Blood anchor pairs can create life from unlife. It has not been seen in 500 years. Are you frightened? Isolde asked. Terrified, he admitted. We do not know if she will be vampire or human, or something else entirely. She will be loved, Isolde said. That is all that matters. They stood together in the garden where roses bloomed eternal, fed by vampire blood and watered by choice. Behind them, Ravenscar Hall glowed with candlelight. Ahead of them, the future waited, uncertain and dangerous, and absolutely theirs. A carriage appeared in the drive bearing the seal of the Vampire Council. Isolde had been expecting it. News of a blood anchor pregnancy would not stay secret long. The council would have questions, demands, perhaps threats. She was not afraid. Let them come, she said, feeling the child move inside her. Let them ask their questions and make their demands. We will face them together. Always together, Lucian agreed. They walked toward the house hand in hand, two vampires who had chosen love over fear, darkness over light, forever over a single mortal lifetime. Isolde thought of the girl she had been standing at an altar in a dying wedding gown, abandoned and humiliated. Thought of the choice she had been given, ruin or rescue, light or darkness. She had chosen darkness. And in that darkness she had found everything she never knew she needed. Love that defied curses, partnership that transcended death. A family built not on blood alone, but on choice and sacrifice, and the willingness to see monsters as capable of redemption. As they reached the house, Isolde paused, looked back at the garden where they had first confessed their love beneath a blood moon, where roses bloomed in defiance of winter, where she had become something more than human and found it was enough, more than enough, everything. Thank you, she said quietly. Lucian looked at her silver eyes, questioning. For saving me, Isolde clarified, for orchestrating everything, for being the monster who taught me that love is worth any curse. He smiled, fangs glinting in the moonlight. Thank you for choosing to be saved, for becoming the monster who taught me that even darkness can bloom. They entered Ravenscar Hall together, blood-anchored and eternal, ready to face whatever came next. Behind them, the roses kept blooming, and the blood moon watched over all.